The Luncheon William Somerset Maugham, 1874 to 1965, was a distinguished British playwright, novelist, and short story writer. He was among the most popular writers of his era and reputedly the highest paid author during the 1930s. His work is characterized by a clear unadorned style, cosmopolitan settings, and a shrewd understanding of human nature. A most delightfully humorous narrative. The Luncheon is a slice of life story about Maugham's luncheon date proposed to him by a woman who he hopes is a supporter of his art. I caught sight of her at the play and in answer to her call, I went over during the interval and sat down beside her. It was long since I had last seen her, and, if someone had not mentioned her name, I hardly think I would have recognized her. She addressed me brightly. "Well, it's many years since we first met. How time does fly. We're none of us getting any younger. Do you remember the first time I saw you? You asked me to luncheon. Did I remember? It was 20 years ago and I was living in Paris. I had a tiny apartment and I was earning barely enough money. She had read a book of mine and had written to me about it." I answered, thanking her, and presently, I received from her another letter saying she was passing through Paris and would like to have a chat with me. But her time was limited and the only free moment she had was on the following Thursday, and would I give her a little luncheon at Foyot's afterwards? Foyot's is a restaurant and it was so far beyond my means that I had never even thought of going there. I had 80 francs, gold francs, to last me the rest of the month, and a modest luncheon should not cost more than 15. If I cut out coffee for the next 2 weeks, I could manage well enough. I answered that I would meet my friend at Foyot's on Thursday at 12:30. She was, in appearance, imposing rather than attractive, and she gave me the impression of having more teeth, white and large and even, than were necessary for any practical purpose. She was talkative, but since she seemed to want to talk about me, I was prepared to be an attentive listener. I was startled when the menu was brought, for the prices were a great deal higher than I had thought. But she reassured me. "I never eat anything for luncheon," she said. "Oh, don't say that," I answered generously. "I never eat more than one thing. I think people eat far too much nowadays. A little fish, perhaps. I wonder if they have any salmon." Well, it was early in the year for salmon and it was not on the menu, but I asked the waiter if there was any. Yes, a beautiful salmon had just come in. It was the first they had had. I ordered it for my guest. The waiter asked her if she would have something while it was being cooked. "No," she answered, "I never eat more than one thing. Unless you had a little caviar." I never mind caviar. I knew I could not afford caviar, but I could not very well tell her that. For myself, I chose the cheapest dish on the menu, and that was a mutton chop. "I think you're unwise to eat meat," she said. "I don't believe in overloading my stomach." She ate the caviar and she ate the salmon. She talked gaily of art and literature and music. But I wondered what the bill would come to. When my mutton chop arrived, she took me quite seriously to task. "I see that you're in the habit of eating a heavy luncheon. I'm sure it's a mistake. Why don't you follow my example and just eat one thing?" I couldn't possibly eat anything more unless they had some of those giant asparagus. I should be sorry to leave Paris without having some of them. My heart sank. I had seen them in the shops and I knew that they were horribly expensive. My mouth had often watered at the sight of them. I'm not in the least hungry, my guest sighed, but if you insist, I don't mind having some asparagus. I ordered them. Aren't you going to have any? No, I never eat asparagus. We waited for the asparagus to be cooked. Panic seized me. It was not a question now of how much money I should have left over for the rest of the month, but whether I had enough to pay the bill. It would be mortifying to find myself 10 francs short and be obliged to borrow from my guest. I knew exactly how much I had, and if the bill came to more, I made up my mind that I would put my hand in my pocket and with a dramatic cry, start up and say it had been picked. Of course, it would be awkward if she had not money enough either to pay the bill. Then, the only thing would be to leave my watch and say I would come back and pay later. The asparagus appeared. I watched her thrust them down her throat in large mouthfuls. At last, she finished. Coffee? I said. Yes, just an ice cream and coffee, she answered. I was past caring now, so I ordered coffee for myself and an ice cream and coffee for her. You know, there's one thing I thoroughly believe in, she said, as she ate the ice cream. One should always get up from a meal feeling one could eat a little more. Are you still hungry? I asked faintly. Oh, no, I'm not hungry. You see, I don't eat luncheon. I have a cup of coffee in the morning and then dinner, but I never eat more than one thing for luncheon. I was speaking for you. Oh, I see. Then a terrible thing happened. While we were waiting for the coffee, the head waiter came up to us bearing a large basket full of huge peaches. But surely peaches were not in season then? Lord knew what they cost. I knew a little later, for my guest, going on with her conversation, absent-mindedly took one. You see, you've filled your stomach with a lot of meat, my one miserable little chop, and you can't eat any more. But I've just had a snack and I shall enjoy a peach. The bill came, and when I paid it I found that I had only enough for a quite inadequate tip. Her eyes rested for an instant on the 3 francs I left for the waiter, and I knew that she thought me mean. But when I walked out of the restaurant I had the whole month before me and not a penny in my pocket. Follow my example, she said as we shook hands, and never eat more than one thing for luncheon. I'll do better than that, I retorted. I'll eat nothing for dinner tonight. Humorist, she cried gaily, jumping into a cab. You're quite a humorist. But I have had my revenge at last. I do not believe that I am a vindictive man, but when the gods take a hand in the matter it is understandable to observe the result with satisfaction. Today, she weighs 20,